In 1961, President Kennedy called on all Americans to rise to the challenges of the day. He knew that success depended upon the unity of efforts throughout the federal government and the nation. The Greater Boston Federal Executive Board, one of 28 across the country, fosters communication, coordination, and collaboration with federal, state, and local government agencies. This is your federal government, and I am your host, Diane LeBlanc. Hello everyone. Today we are featuring the United States Census Bureau, and our focus will be on the 2020 census and what you need to know to make sure that you are counted. Our guest is Regional Director Jeff Behler. Welcome, Jeff. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
All right. So we like to begin by having our guests introduce themselves. Tell our audience a little bit about your background and how long you've been with the United States Census.
Sure. So I'm raised in the Midwest out of Detroit, Michigan. I've been with the Bureau for about 24 years now. This will be my third census. So I had an opportunity to work 2000 in Detroit, 2010 in the Dallas, Texas region, and then this will be my first census here in the New York region in 2020.
Excellent. Well, again, it's nice to have you here. Now, the New York region, what geographic area does that encompass?
Yeah, so we're one of 6 regions across the country. We cover all of Massachusetts, all of New York, New Jersey, the remainder of the New England states, and Puerto Rico.
Okay, excellent. Well, again, we're pleased that you're with us today.
Thank you.
We also like to provide, when we feature an agency, just a very brief history of the agency. So, in a nutshell, history of the Census Bureau and what's a census?
Yeah, it's really started in 1790. Article 1, Section 2 mandates we conduct an enumeration of both people and housing units every 10 years for representation and for funding purposes. So that started in 1790. We've been doing it ever since, every 10 years, and we're excited. Very different census in 2020. And it really is about 2 things. It's about representation. It's about funding. That's at the heart of the census.
Excellent. And the Census Bureau itself, because the first census was conducted by the United States Marshals, right?
That's correct.
So when did we have a Census Bureau?
So, oh God, that's a great question. I don't recall when the census was established, but I can tell you we've been working hard over the last decade. Every census, I mean, we've already started planning for 2030, believe it or not. So there's a lot of work that goes involved. It is the largest peacetime operation that we conduct in the United States.
Excellent. So again, many people know every 10 years the United States federal government is going to do the census, right? And that is going to be our focus today, but that's once every 10 years. Right. And you mentioned you're already planning for the next one, right? People don't see that planning effort. But what do you do when you're not doing the big census?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize we are out there knocking on doors every day. You hear about the unemployment rate that comes out the first Friday of every month. We collect that data for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who releases the unemployment rate, Consumer Price Index, housing starts, crime indices. We collect data for the Center for Disease Control, the American Community Survey, the richest set of data that is based on, for every neighborhood that comes out every year, is data that's collected by employees of the U.S. Census Bureau. So we are out there knocking on doors every day.
Okay. So in terms of that data collection versus the data collection for the census that's done every 10 years, is that data shared? You're collecting it for other agencies. So you're sharing that data with federal agencies, yes or no?
We're sharing statistical summaries.
Okay.
So all federal agencies, all the data we protect, every survey, regardless who it's for, is protected under Title 13.
Okay.
And under Title 13, we can never release information to anyone that could potentially identify an individual or a household. So even these ongoing surveys that we conduct, it's the statistical summaries that we're sharing that will eventually be released to the public, like the unemployment rate.
Right, excellent. So, and I think that's an important issue, right? Because people need to trust
Absolutely.
that the information that they are giving, right? And it's important, and we're going to talk about why it's important. But they need to trust that it's not going to be shared and associated with them personally.
Absolutely.
So data is, personal data is never shared with any level of government.
That's correct. So we ask partners to start the conversation about the census, and we say that conversation is the census is safe, the census is easy, and the census is important. And this really hits on the census is safe. Every piece of data that we collect is protected under Title 13, meaning we can never release that information at a person or household level. Local, state, federal law enforcement can never access our data at any time for any reason. Homeland Security and ICE can never access our data at any time for any reason. The Patriot Act does not supersede Title 13. We have been taken to federal court. The Census Bureau has been taken to federal court numerous times since 1954 when Title 13 was enacted, and we have won every time. There has never been a breach of Title 13. In addition, everyone who works on a census, whether you work a 4-week operation or you're a permanent employee, you take an oath of confidentiality for life, meaning if I were to release information that could potentially identify an individual or a household, I'll be in prison for up to 5 years, fined up to $250,000. So the safety and the security of the data is the foundation of a complete and accurate census. So we ask our partners to feel confident that they can tell their communities the census is safe.
Nice. So in my prior life, I worked for an agency called the National Archives and Records Administration, and one of our lines of business, if you will, was to assist individuals looking to trace their family history. And the census data was a treasure trove for them, but it could only be released every 72 years?
That's correct.
Is that still the case?
That's still the case. Every 72 years we can release the data that was collected from that census. So we're going to be releasing the 1950 census in 2022.
And again, that gets at just the privacy protection for folks.
Absolutely. And there is a process in place. It is interesting. You can get your own census form if you'd like. And this is really important. I know of a family in the New York area who lost their home. Everything was burned down, including their passports, their Social Security cards. They had to prove they lived in the United States at a certain time period. It's a fee service, but you do have the ability to get your own, only your own census response from a previous census.
Excellent. All right. So let's talk about the 2020 census. What's the timeline?
Yeah, so it begins March 12th of this year. We're going to start our mail out. We'll do a total of 5 mail outs beginning March 12th through the end of April. And that's what's different. And this really goes into the easy piece of that conversation, that the census is safe, easy, it's important. You'll have 3 ways to self-respond to the 2020 census, which is very new. For the first time ever, every household across the nation, if they choose to fill it out online, they have that opportunity. For the first time ever, every household in the nation, if they want to call their information in over the phone to the Census Bureau, they can do that. I want to stress, we're not doing outbound calling, but a household can call into us and give their information over the phone. Both online and over the phone will be available in English and 12 non-English languages. So we're really excited about that.
Wow.
But then every household that wants to fill it out on paper, because that's the way they've done it, will also get that opportunity. So there's really 3 ways that every household can choose to respond in 2020. Online, call it in over the phone, or fill it out on paper and return it.
So how do you get, if you don't choose online or over the phone, how do you get a paper copy?
Yeah, so the majority of the nation, the very first mail out that we do beginning March 12th will include the URL where to go to online. It'll include your census ID. It's just a 12-digit unique identifier that takes place of your address. You go online, you enter in your ID. We automatically know from that ID what your address is. Let's say you don't have that ID. It's okay. You check a box, I don't have my ID, an address screen will pop up. Then you just have to key in your address online. So the majority of households will get that information as well as a list of 13 toll-free telephone numbers, 1 for each language that we support. And only about 20 to 21% of the nation will get a questionnaire in that very first mail out. We are trying to drive people to go online or to fill it out or call it in over the phone, only because it saves a huge amount of taxpayer dollars.
Right.
It costs a lot of money to mail out, mail back, do all the data capture that's done with paper forms. By April 8th of this year, if a household has yet to respond, we're automatically going to send them a paper questionnaire.
Okay,
So
all
there's
right.
no need to call the toll-free number to ask for a questionnaire. If you want to fill it out that way, we will send it to you. You just may not get it in mid-March. You may get it at the beginning of April.
Excellent, excellent. Now, have you made projections about what percentage you think will do it, one of the two easier ways?
Yeah, so we have a self-response rate projection, and that's about 16.5% for the
Okay.
nation. We expect 16.5% of the nation to self-respond online, over the phone, on paper.
Okay.
I think that can be a lot higher. I really do. And working with partners throughout the state, throughout the country, just seeing the engagement, understanding why it's so important. We have partners who are hosting recruiting events right now because we recruit online. That's how people can apply to work for the census.
Okay.
Just go to
There you go.
2020census.gov/jobs and apply for a job online. Well, those same partners, whether it's a library or a church or a community-based organization, are already setting up events after March 12th to bring those community members back in to sit down at one of their computers to fill out the census. That's what's so exciting.
So it's interesting because in preparation for this, really local communities, right, where people live, they have a tremendous ability to be those trusted voices. And you mentioned, right, you know, your church groups, other organizations, nonprofits in your community that might be willing to have a computer dedicated to people who want to come in and fill out the census online. Senior centers,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
Because not everybody has a computer at home,
Yep.
but they might like to try to fill it out online. So how does the census ensure that local communities, local trusted partners are coming forward to do their part?
Yeah, so we have a saying, even though the census is a national event, in order to be successful, it has to be conducted at the local level.
Okay.
Meaning, first off, we have to hire locally. So if we're going to end up having people knock on doors to collect that information on the short form census, we want to make sure it's people who speak the language, who understand the culture, who know that community. The other piece of that are our partners. So we have a team of over 250 partnership specialists just throughout our region who are out there working with church leaders, with elected officials, working with community-based organization leaders, educating them on the census, on why it's so important, how safe it is, how easy it will be in 2020, and asking them to take that message directly to their community. Because at the end of the day, while census staff will go anywhere, we certainly understand a lot of people don't trust the federal government. So, but they trust their pastor, they trust their local
Exactly.
business owner, or the person who works at the laundromat.
So in complete count committees, right? Every local community is strongly encouraged to have a complete count committee. In addition to those groups you've just talked about, who else should be on that?
Yeah, it's anyone who, you think about your community. What we ask the leaders who asked to be take over or to start a complete count committee. Think about the challenges in your community, and we have some great tools on our website that show you the data behind the community,
Right.
broken down by race and ethnicity and languages spoken and whether they own or rent, whether they have children under the age of 5. All the categories are all data that makes it difficult to get a complete and accurate count. So we ask them, if you have a certain population, maybe new Americans, who is the trusted voice for those new Americans? Make sure they're on the complete count committee so they can help choose what's the right message, and then how do we get that message to those community members?
I would think for every community has some number of undocumented individuals. And the census count, who is counted in the census?
Everyone needs to be
Everyone.
counted. Everyone needs to be counted.
Whether documented or undocumented, whether homeless,
That's correct. We have
college
to count.
students.
We have to count everyone, whether there's foreign nationals that are here maybe going to school, we need to count them. You mentioned the homeless, difficult to enumerate population. We count them. We count people who are traveling in circuses or racetracks or RV parks. They sold their home and they bought an RV and travel around the country now. all those people have to be counted. According to the Constitution, everyone who's living in the United States needs to be counted.
And the magic date, you're counted in the community that you're living in as of
April 1st,
April
2020.
1st.
That is Census Day. So whether you fill out the form March 12th or whether you fill it out July 1st, we're asking who lived at that particular address as of April 1st, 2020.
Right. So when the mailing goes out, there's 2 people in the house, there's 10 people in the house. Everybody doesn't get a form. Who fills it out?
So all the forms we mail out, it's really the census is an address-based survey. So we're sending forms to addresses.
Okay.
And what we're asking is whether it's the homeowner or the person who's renting to fill out the form for everyone living there. So if we have 2 families living in a single family apartment, we don't care that it may be illegally subdivided. What we care is that both families get included on that one form, to make sure they include everyone from babies and small children, grandparents, maybe someone who's living there, maybe, there's a different type of homelessness we hear about now, people who are couch surfing, from friends to family members kind of thing. So if they're living there as of April 1st, we need to be sure they get included on that census form.
And again, I think that's a really important point to emphasize, because in many cases you have extended family, right, living
Yep.
at a home. They may be related to you, they may be unrelated to you, but everybody who is in that location needs to be recorded, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We really ask where you usually live or stay most of the time as of April 1st, 2020. So for instance, college students who are away at college, we want to count them where they live or stay most of the time, which is at college. Even though they may come back for the summer months, we're asking parents, don't include your college students who's living in another community, on or off campus. We're going to count them there, kind of thing. But we certainly heard, and especially in the New England area with Hurricane Maria, a lot of families from Puerto Rico moved. People may have intentions of going back at some point in time and to wherever they lived across the country for whatever reason. But if they have no other permanent place to go, we ask that they be counted where they're living or staying as of April 1st, 2020.
So you just mentioned the college students, right? And they should be counted where they go to college. You said their parents shouldn't count them. What if they're counted where they go to college and their parents count them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So believe it or not, college students are one of the most overcounted groups we have in the census.
I would think.
And that's why we ask some of the questions we do. Part of gathering information on a person's name and their birth date and their race and ethnicity and things like that. So at the end of the census, we can unduplicate it.
Okay.
We also know, we call them snowbirds. They have a home in
Florida.
Florida that they go to, and they may be down there during April 1st. But if they spend most of the time, in the Northeast, we want to make sure they fill out the form in their Northeast. Make sure they include everyone who usually lives at that address. Even if they're down in Florida on April 1st, fill out that form in Florida, but just put 0 people live there, because you spend most of your time up in the Northeast.
Okay, all right. So how do we count the homeless?
We have a group quarters operation. Now, group quarters will go to military barracks. We work with the military jails and prisons, college dormitories, and nursing homes. And a piece of that is called our service-based enumeration. So over a 3-day period at the end of March, we're going to visit every mobile food van, every soup kitchen, every homeless shelter. We're going to reach out to that local administrator to say, over this 3-day period, what's the best time for our staff to come and enumerate the people who live in there. Now, we'll ask questions. They'll have the opportunity to fill out a form. Sometimes we just get a head count. It depends on the population and their willingness to complete it. Right now, we're working with partners throughout the nation, partners who deal with the homeless population. And we're creating this exhaustive list of places where people who are experiencing homelessness, if they're not staying in a shelter, where are they staying? Like a tent city in the woods, underneath the overpass, behind a church. And on the night of March 31st at midnight, we're going to send hundreds of thousands of people across this nation to visit every one of those sites to do a head count to make sure we get the homeless population in the 2020 census.
So you've sort of made mention of the number of people that the Census Bureau is going to have doing the work that needs to be done. Again, hopefully people are going to do this by phone, do it online. But when they don't, it's sort of the old-fashioned way.
Right.
Where if they haven't filled it out by a certain date or somehow responded by a certain date, somebody is going to go knock on their door?
That's correct. So starting May 13th, we start the biggest, the most costliest operation on a census called non-response follow-up. We anticipate hiring around 500,000 people nationwide to go knock on doors of addresses that have yet to respond to the 2020 census. We ask the same questions that people could fill out online, over the phone, or on paper.
So how much does it, and you may not have this, probably not a fair question, if I don't respond either on the phone in a timely way, if I don't pay attention, respond online, respond over the phone, or fill out the questionnaire and send it back, how much am I costing myself, the taxpayer?
Yeah, it's. I don't know that we have a dollar amount, but it without a doubt it is the most costliest operation when you think of what it takes to hire 500,000 people and train them and to monitor their performance, give them a device, and pay for them to go out there from the time they leave their home
Very
to they
labor
collect it.
intense.
It is very labor intensive. And again, it's the same questions that people could fill out. One of the things we learned, we had a 2018 census test in Providence County, Rhode Island, which is also part of the New York region. And we learned we would knock on doors and we'd see people peek out the windows and they wouldn't open the door. And we'd leave a little note and saying, hey, it's not too late to go online if you still want to go online. That way we don't have to come back. And people would do that. It's a very expensive way to get people to fill it out online. But it is also something that we saw on the test, so it was interesting.
So if somebody does knock on the door, actually, let me back up a little bit. Many jobs. Are they at various levels, or, I mean, what do they pay? Does it depend upon the part of the country
it
that
does.
they're in? And what's the best way to get one of these jobs?
Yeah, so www.2020census.gov/jobs. You can see the pay rate for your county. It ranges probably anywhere from $17 to $30 depending on what part of the nation you're in. But you can look up your county, see the pay rate. Apply now button, you just click on it. It takes about 20-25 minutes. The hardest part of the application process is creating your password, because this is a federal job. There's certain characters you have to use, certain number of digits you have to use. That truly is the hardest part. We're not asking for work history or things like that. So we're looking for people who want to work in their community, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're knocking on doors, you're asking questions. That's really the majority of the positions we have. We have offices throughout the nation. You can also apply for those office jobs. The majority of those have been filled, but there is turnover. So we hire clerical staff, we hire supervisory staff to work in those offices. And then we also need supervisors to work in the field to kind of be the lead for those people who are out there knocking on doors, making sure they're filling their payroll out, they're submitting their data, answering and providing support as needed.
Excellent. So anybody out there looking for a job, right? This is a great
Think about it. You can be a part
opportunity.
of history.
Right.
We do this once every 10 years. You're serving your community. And these are short-term temporary jobs where you choose your schedule. So if you have a full-time job, you can work nights, you can work weekends, and be extremely successful, working 10 to 15 hours for us. So it's just a great opportunity to serve your community.
So if a census taker does come to your door, will they have an official ID? How will you know? I mean, how will you know that it's okay to open the door?
Yeah, again, I'd like to drive people to our website, 2020census.gov. You can click, there's links. We have a rumors and scams page that shows you if there's scams going on in your particular neighborhood or nationwide. That there's always scams in the years ending in zero. People see the census and they think of it as an opportunity to scam community residents. So that's one thing you can do. But all our employees will have an official badge with a Commerce Seal watermark. They'll be carrying a handheld device, a smartphone that they'll be using to collecting information. They'll also have confidentiality notices. We have on our Scams and Rumors webpage a toll-free number that you can call if you want to verify that indeed the person who visited you or who's knocking on your door is a census employee. We can do the employment verification. Or if you have something just doesn't seem right, call that toll-free number, report it, let us do the research, look into it to see if there may be a scam. Because if there is, we call local law enforcement, we call the media, and we activate our partner network, who probably has the loudest voice and the most reach in a community.
And again, there are so many scams out there. we've sort of, become suspicious, right?
Yep.
And not necessarily a bad thing. So I think you said earlier that the Census Bureau won't call you.
That's correct.
Okay.
So we have, and regarding the scams, let me also mention 3 things that we'll never ask. And these are typical. We never ask for Social Security
There you
numbers.
go. Yeah.
We never ask for bank or credit
There you
card
go.
information. We never ask for money.
And we never say we're going to put you in jail if you don't fill out the
That's
census.
correct. That's correct.
There you go.
Well, even though it's mandatory, it's required by law, we rather focus on the importance than deal with things like that. So it is important that people understand that there are already scams that have started, but know that we don't ask for Social Security, money, or bank or credit card information.
And we're not calling on the phone.
That's correct. Now, we do collect a phone number on the census form. The reason we do that, if there's a quality issue, let's say, for instance, you write in the box, there's 5 people who live at this address, but you only list 4 names.
Okay.
We need to know which one's right. Rather than send someone to your door, we'll just call you and ask you.
So you will in that case?
Yeah, but we're not doing any outbound calling, data collection. It should be a result of you already supplying your census information, and we just had a question on the quality.
How long does it take to fill out the census?
It's very basic. So it's a short form only census. We ask for your name, your age and your date of birth, your race and ethnicity, whether or not you're of Hispanic origin, your gender, whether you own or rent your home, and your relationship to the first person listed on the form, like mother, father, roommate. That's it. Then we have an overcount question and an undercount question. Just a reminder, hey, include these people if you haven't, or don't include these people. And then we ask you for the total population that lives in your household. That's it. That's all we ask.
So earlier, you indicated that having the name, having birth dates, that's helpful in getting rid of any duplication. Why do you need to know gender?
Gender, when you look at anti-discrimination provisions that have been created by the federal government, we need that data to enforce a lot of those laws. Race and ethnicity is important for the Voting Rights Act, for the Civil Rights Act. Having that data allows us to organizations and federal government to ensure that the laws and provisions that are put in place are being enacted.
So you've got a question on race and ethnicity, but yet there's another question specific to the Hispanic, Latino, Spanish population. Why?
And again, that's tied to the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That data is needed to ensure that those acts are being enforced in communities that have a high population of the Hispanic origin. What's
the penalty if you don't fill out the census?
Yeah, so there is a penalty. I don't recall what it is. And again, we don't want to focus on. We're not a regulatory agency. We're not going to go out and arrest anyone. Or we want to focus on why it's so important that data is coming in.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the why, right? The census data determines how many seats,
that's right,
that a state gets in the House of Representatives. It can determine at the state level and the local level, rearranging things, redistricting things in terms of your elected officials. And it's directly tied to so many federal programs that come back to local communities to provide services.
That's correct.
How much money is distributed annually that's tied to numbers that come from the census?
So over $675 billion of federal funding is disseminated every year based upon formulas that use census data. So this is Medicaid, this is your highway planning and construction, so your mass transit, your roads. This is money for schools, for emergency planning services, your community block development grants. Elderly care, Head Start, National School Lunch Program, critical programs to communities that if people think their census isn't a big deal, or not including everyone on their house is okay to do, it will have a negative effect on their community for the next 10 years.
And that's just so important to stress, right? Because especially those that might be inclined not to trust, who might say, maybe I don't have to fill this out, they really need to think about that.
Absolutely.
Because they, in fact, may be the beneficiary of some of the money that's coming back to the community.
That's absolutely right. It's a simplistic example, but I think it's powerful. Think of a school, let's say in your neighborhood you have a school of 100 kids. And on the 2020 census, only 80 of those kids get counted. For the next 10 years, that school is going to receive 80% of the funding it deserves.
That's crazy.
And it doesn't just affect the 20 kids who weren't counted, it affects all 100.
Right.
Now apply that to programs in your community, whether that's fixing potholes or improving mass transit or
Housing.
Medicaid or housing.
Senior services.
Exactly, healthcare. All of that is tied to accurate census data. And we get one opportunity every 10 years to get it right. That's why we have to work together.
So the census never shares its name-specific data with a local community, with a local government. But I know in my own community, just the other day, I got something from the city clerk. It was my community's local census, right? And I'm going to fill that out and I'm going to send it back. Does the Census Bureau ever go to a local community and ask them for their data? Do they have the same protections where they can't share it?
So a lot of the data that we collect from local and state governments throughout the decade is used for research purposes. We use it for matching purposes, we use it for quality purposes type thing. When it comes to enumeration during the census, it has to be data that the Census Bureau collects.
Okay, all right. And again, in terms of timing, people should know that they could be getting something from their local community and they need to fill that
Absolutely.
out as well. We've covered, I think, an awful lot of territory. What haven't I asked you about? What have I missed?
Yeah, no, I think you covered everything. The big things are, again, it's not just enough to pledge to fill out your census form. We're asking people to have that conversation that the census is safe, that it's easy, how important it is for their community, at their place of employment, at their house of worship, with their family and friends, at their favorite restaurant. Take that information to the community. Everyone who's listening is a trusted voice to a group of people. And we need people to take that message to those that come to them for validation or for education.
Recap just briefly the timeline, the important dates again. And
So March 12th will be the national mail-out begins. March 12th through the 20th, every household across the nation will be receiving something. Either we're going to hand deliver it or the Postal Service will be delivering it. May 13th is when we start knocking on doors of every address that has yet to respond to the 2020 census. And then the end of July of 2020 will be when the counting ends. So that's when the self-response ends, either online, over the phone, on paper. That's when we're going to stop knocking on doors.
And for those that might be interested in a job, how long does the hiring process take?
It's relatively quick. The application process is about 20 minutes. We're going to start ramping up hiring, making the selection calls the beginning of March. So it's not too late for people who are interested to go online and to apply for a job. We hire 60 days in advance because this is a federal position, so you have to get fingerprinted, go through a background check. We want to give applicants plenty of time if there is a hit on their background check to adjudicate anything they need to do. But we'll actually start employing people. They'll start knocking on doors May 13th.
Excellent, excellent. Great opportunity for people. Any final words other than a plea to please fill out the census?
Yeah, it is important. Fill out the census when you get that, and please have the conversation. Share this education on what the census truly is and what it means for the next 10 years for your community.
Incredible. Good information. I want to thank Regional Director Jeff Behler for being with us today and for helping us to better understand what we can expect related to the 2020 census and why it is so critically important that each of us participate. I thank you for watching, and I hope that you will continue to join us as we feature other federal agencies on your federal government.